Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Tougher Minds webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go any further, we want to let you know that we will be taking your questions periodically throughout this webinar, and probably the bulk of the questions at the end. Please do use the Q&A function on Zoom, not the chat. If you could use the Q&A function, which you should see on your screen. The Q&A function is how we'd like to take your questions. As I say, we'll take some throughout and the bulk of them at the end. In a few moments, we'll be joined by our host, Dr. John Finn. He's worked in the fields of well-being, performance psychology, transformational leadership, and change management for nearly 20 years. He founded the award-winning Tougher Minds consultancy. They use the latest insights from neuroscience, behavioural science, and psychology to create and deliver simple and practical products and programs that empower individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations to build better habits for fulfilled potential in a challenging world. Dr. Finn has created these unique insights with his colleagues using their own proprietary research and applied programs. These have helped major businesses and organizations in the UK, Europe, and the US. Dr. Finn's also worked extensively at the highest levels of elite sport, advised the government, had his work featured in the Sunday Times, the Sunday Telegraph, and People Management magazine. He's also published peer-reviewed papers and sports psychology books, and he's written a regular column in the Yorkshire Post business section. So please welcome our host for this webinar, Dr. John Finn.
Thank you, Andrew, for that kind introduction. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us this afternoon. I hope everybody is safe and well, and I know what is quite a challenging time. If you've wanted to join the How to Build Habits for Wellbeing and Performance, you're in the right place. And I want to point out that all the ideas we talk about today, they are genuinely transferable life skills. So you can use this as an adult in the workplace, you can teach this to your partner, you can teach this to your child. One of the brands we have at Tougher Minds is the Willpower Academy, which is our education and families brand. So all these ideas we teach across the lifespan. So they're there for everybody. I want to get going with a test. It's going to be one of those kind of sessions. You're going to have to engage if you want to get what's out of it. So the test is a reading test. And I just wanted to see if you guys can make sense of the copy in the white lozenge. Just see if you can read that. You can read it out loud or in your mind. Okay, so why can we do that? Why can we make sense of these jumble words? Well, to understand this, we need to understand the brain. That's where we always start at Tougher Minds. So we need to understand that our brain is being run, and that we are being run predominantly by the limbic regions of the brain. You can make a mini model of your brain if you want. So if you put your left or your right hand flat like this, and you put your thumb into the palm of your hand like that, and you wrap your fingers around your thumb like that, that is a mini model of your brain. The thumb in the middle is representing the limbic region. Sometimes we call it the $1 million brain. And the little finger is representing the part of your brain behind the eyes all the way to the top of the forehead. And we're going to learn that we can use that part of the brain to manage the limbic regions and to build better habits. The reason that we can read the copy from the slide is that most of what we're doing most of the time is being run by the limbic regions, and it's mindless, automatic or semi-automatic behavior. In other words, it's a habit. Most of what we're doing most of the time is a habit. Not the 40 or so % you read in popular self-help books. It's most of what we're doing is mindless behavior. A preeminent professor, George Lakoff, would say that for every 50 things your brain is doing right now, you're only conscious of one. And you'll see Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow, the work that he won a Nobel Prize for, talking about how we are driven by habits. The good news is that we can understand how habits work, which means that we can break them down and rebuild them. And this is our proprietary T.R.A.I.T habit model that we'll talk about later. But first of all, let's just explore some of the habits that are running what we're doing right now. Some of them are really helpful, like breathing is a really helpful habit. You're not thinking about it, it's just ticking away in the background. How you are listening right now is broadly a habit. As we saw, reading is broadly a habit. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that's unhelpful. the way that we make decisions about people, we make judgments about each other within about 3 seconds. So within about 3 seconds of meeting somebody new, we judge their entire life. Not particularly sensible, but that's how our brain works. And the way that habits work is the more you practice something, the better you get at it. Because the 100 or so billion neurons in your brain, they're like plasticine. And the more you practice something, the more of those neurons adapt and get dedicated to that thing that you're practicing. So habits are absolutely fundamental to everything that we do. And we get good at the habits that we practice, both the helpful ones and the unhelpful. And they're so dominant that habits inform your entire experience of the world. So my experience of the world is what I'm in the habit of attending to. So if I'm in the habit of beating myself up all the time, that will be part of how I experience the world. If I'm in the habit of thinking how great I am and how fantastic I am, that will be my experience of the world. And it doesn't just inform us at a personal level, it informs our collective experience as well. So your teams run on habits, your family units run on habits. And it goes beyond that. Your organization, your business runs on habits. Your culture is a sum of all the habits that are going on in your business. So they're absolutely fundamental, yet we don't really understand that. So in order to understand the helpful habits that we need to build, we're going to explore the type of things that we need to do in order to be healthy, happy, and at our best, whether it's during lockdown or at any other time. So 3 broad areas we need to get right. Number 1, we need to look after our brain. And to do that, we need to get our sleep right, our diet right, and our exercise right. There's a very important area of our brain called the hippocampus or the hippocampi. You can see them illuminated in the brain model there. They're very important because they're the only sites in the human brain that we understand produce new brain cells. We need lots of new brain cells if we're going to manage stress well, if we're going to be able to learn and adapt as we need to keep doing in the challenging world that we live in. So good sleep, good diet, good exercise will keep good healthy brain function, and it'll also allow us to use our prefrontal cortex, which is essential for building new habits. So we need to get that right. And then what we need to get right is a really good balance between what we call hedonism and what we call eudaimonia. Hedonism is all about having fun, laying your hair down, giving in to short-term gratification. And it feels easier than ever to do that in the world that we live in because big businesses work out how to monetize it. But the other thing that we need to get right is making personal progress, achieving, getting results, feeling like we are moving forwards. If we don't feel like we're doing that, we're starting to understand that it's the biggest cause of burnout in the workplace for adults. So we've got to get that balance right between, giving in to short-term gratification and having some fun, but also persisting when we need to. And of course, we've got to do all of these 3 things in tandem with the other people that in our lives because we are social. If we get this right, it makes life super easy. But here's the challenge. Our brain has evolved, and we've been evolving for over 200,000 years. And these are the deep-seated limbic regions, the thumb in your model. We've evolved to prioritize staying alive, being concerned by how we're perceived by other people, that is social status, and also to prioritize saving energy. So building on Paul MacLean's True Night Brain model, Paul MacLean was the first person, very famous neuroscientist, first person to really give us a sound understanding of how the brain functioned as a unit. He talked about the monkey brain. He was the first person to talk about that. So we've innovated from that. We talk about the ape brain. We are apes, that's our lineage. We are great apes, but also APE is an acronym that's getting at. We are designed to stay alive, be concerned by how we're perceived by important people, and save energy. And these survival habits, they are not always that helpful in the world that we live in. And you've got to think of all these ideas you can see on the slide as a habit. Worrying is a habit. If you want to get good at worrying, all you need to do is practice it a lot. Then you'll get loads of wires dedicated in your brain for worrying, and you'll become a world champion worrier. The same for beating yourself up, the same for procrastination, the same for giving into temptation. So that's the challenge that we face. And to extend that challenge is we now live in a world described as the VUCA world. This essentially means that the only constant in the world that we live in is change, and COVID-19 is part of that. Here's an insight into what the VUCA world entails.
The only constants in our world are change and disruption. Businesses are under pressure to innovate, adapt and grow. More than ever, they need their people to be more resilient, adaptable, focused and mentally sharp. But life is fast moving and we're always on. This creates distractions, pressures and stress. Feeling well, thinking clearly and performing to our potential feels more challenging every day.
So this is the challenge, and to extend that challenge, we also live in a world described as the attention economy. This means that your attention has been commoditized by big business. They've worked out ways to sell your attention, to monetize it. And it's now common language to explain that the most expensive land or real estate on the planet are human eyeballs, because everybody is trying to get their message into your eyeballs. And it feels harder than ever before to actually pay sustained attention to anything. And what big business has done, it's worked out what humans are designed to do, and it's tapped into that, and it's plugged its products into it to make its products as addictive as possible. And these organizations, they are making it much more difficult to get really good sleep, diet and exercise, to make personal progress. It's making it super easy just to get on the hedonic treadmill and to keep pursuing short-term gratification. But that ultimately stops us being healthy, happy, and at our best. And it's the downside of the VUCA world. And what we need to therefore recognize is that it's the unhelpful habits that are the root cause of all of the well-being and performance challenges that we face in work, life, and education. So mental health challenges are driven by unhelpful habits, as are high levels of stress, as are presenteeism, as are disengaged people and teams, as are productivity and innovation problems, as are leadership problems, and all these ideas that we see. Revising properly for your exams is a habit problem. They're all habit problems, and we're not really understanding this yet, but they are. And in order to manage any of these areas better, it's not about knowing more stuff, it's about building better habits, which is what we're going to talk about. Before we do that, we're going to have a test, okay? Our short-term memory only lasts for about 30 seconds, and our brain can only hold between maybe 5 and 7 chunks of information at a time. So in order to learn and retain information, it's really important that we repeat to remember, remember to repeat, R to R. One way of doing that is testing ourselves. I want you to see if you can answer this question. What does VUCA stand for? So you can write it down, or you can think about it in your mind's eye. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, so it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. If you got all 4 right, you get 10 points. Well done, make a note of that. We'll have these up at the end. If you didn't get all 4 right, guys, you don't get any points. I'm sorry about that. There'll be other opportunities to earn points later on. Okay, so here's the shorthand version of everything that I've said. We live in a world where the only constant is change, described as the VUCA world, as we enter the 4th industrial revolution. And we have a brain that's been evolving for over 200,000 years. Our brain's number one operating rule is the easier it is to do something, the more likely it is you will do it. That's a brain that runs on habits. It's the brain that wants to conserve energy. That hasn't always been, for most of our existence, energy has been a really scarce resource. As we saw, we defaulted back to that type of behavior when we thought the supermarkets might run out of things. We went out and we emptied the shelves, because we are hardwired to think like that. So it turns out that when you put that kind of brain that doesn't like change in a world where the only constant is change, what you end up with is more people than ever before reporting that they do not feel very well, whether they are an adult, a teenager, or a child. More people than ever before are reporting this. And it makes complete sense when we look at the neuroscience, the behavioural science, and the psychology that sits behind this. So that's the first part of the talk. So we got some knowledge about why unhelpful habits are problematic. So that's good, but it's only the first step. So how do we stop ourselves failing then in this very challenging world? How do we stop other people that we care about failing? Well, what we need to do is adopt what we're going to call a purposeful development mindset. This mindset is all about being resilient, getting good at adapting to change, getting good at thinking critically about ourselves in a really helpful way. And it's about getting good at building small, new, helpful habits so that we can keep adapting and adjusting to the challenging world that we live in. To do this, we need to do what we're going to call me power conditioning. This means, and we can put this on a continuum, it means taking purposeful action, deliberate action to help ourselves to be at our best. So one end of the continuum is, I refuse to work towards being at my best. I have no control over whether I can sleep well or eat well or exercise well. There's no way I can stop myself putting another chocolate biscuit in my mouth. There's no way I can get up and make myself move around more. There's no way that I can be in bed 5 minutes earlier tonight. There's no way that I can do anything about me being more productive or me being better at managing my stress or me being a better leader. That's completely out of my control. Me power conditioning is about taking responsibility and purposely choosing to work towards being at your best. It's not about being perfect, it's just about working on yourself all the time. And to understand this, we're going to share a story about one of the most exceptional high performers on the planet who's exceptionally good at me power conditioning, but also exceptionally good at doing something we're going to call self-watching. So this is Novak Djokovic. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Andrew Whitelam, to explain more about Novak and why what he does is really interesting. Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, Novak Djokovic has won 16 Grand Slam titles, and he gave a fascinating pre-Wimbledon interview in 2015 to the Daily Telegraph's tennis writer Simon Briggs. Djokovic explained that he uses self-watching techniques. And in the interview, he explained more about his approach. That led Simon Briggs to suggest that Novak Djokovic had the equivalent of a small CCTV camera on his shoulder, which allowed him to observe and thus break his bad habits. Novak Djokovic apparently liked this image and agrees that he is constantly monitoring himself for negative energy and wasted potential. Essentially, he uses his camera to self-watch.
So this is such a fantastic insight because the first step to building a new habit is watching ourselves intelligently. Remember, most of what we're doing most of the time is mindless behavior. It's automatic, semi-automatic behavior. So in order to pause that, we have to step back and watch ourselves. And it's almost like having a CCTV camera. And when we do that, we activate the little finger in our model, in our brain model, the prefrontal cortex. We call this area of the brain the hack brain. Hack stands for helpful attention control. And that's what underpins being resilient. It's the same as, hack is the same as regulating our emotions. We imagine that a character, a special character runs this area of the brain, which I'm going to introduce with a fanfare. So the character that we imagine runs this part of the brain is called Willpower or Willpower. You can decide which one it is for you. And we can use Willpower or Willpower to help us to watch ourselves, to be more aware. And the first thing that we need to watch is our habits, both our helpful habits, the kind of things that we do that help us to be healthy, happy, and at our best, but also our unhelpful habits. And what we need to do is, and this is what we teach people to do, is target one small unhelpful habit at a time and replace that unhelpful habit with something that's much more helpful for us. And we empower people so they can do this again and again and again and build up more and more helpful habits. And that's how we take more control over these three core areas and get the kind of outcomes that we want. And this is what a purposeful development mindset is all about. And actually what we're starting to see is that some organizations, some teams, they are becoming purposeful development. They are prioritizing, empowering their people to get really good at making these small adjustments regularly, to prioritize getting better every single day, working on these small, new, helpful habits. And what they're really empowering their people to do in neuroscience language is get good at regulating their emotions. And what we see is that when we help people to do that, these are all the outcomes that we get: improved performance, greater well-being, enhanced resilience, increased productivity, increased innovation, reduced presenteeism, reduced stress, improved morale, improved employee retention, increased employee engagement, better leadership development, better performance under pressure, happier people in our teams and our organizations, more successful change management. And it all stems from empowering people to make tiny adjustments, because that's how you start to build a new habit. You make a tiny adjustment. And we teach people to make tiny adjustments to these core habits, because we found over the years, and over working with tens of thousands of people, if people get these things right, life gets so much easier. And it all starts with a tiny adjustment. If you want to build better sleep, diet, and exercise habits, you can just got to adjust something really small in the first instance. Same for better stress management. Same for habits around spending less time on unhelpful thoughts. Same for habits that make it easier for you to perform under pressure. Same for habits that make it easier for you to be productive, so you can be creative. Same for habits around building robust confidence. Same for habits around becoming a better leader. Same for habits from an educational perspective, for performing better in exams, for learning better, for revising better. So we can learn to get better at all these ideas. And over the coming weeks and months, we're going to share more of our content in webinar format around these core areas. So do look out for those webinars. There's a simple process we can use if we want to get better at building new habits. We call it personal change management. Change management is a very well understood term, but often we forget that it's a person-centric idea. If organizations are going to make it more normal that their people work from home in the future, what they need to do is actually empower the individuals to learn how to do that really well via personal change management. And it's a simple 3-step process. If we want to do me power conditioning, be at our best more often, have a purposeful development mindset, the first thing that we need to do is watch ourselves and recognize what are the vital habits for me? Which habits are going to make it really easier for me to be healthy, happy, and at my best? So I might say, well, sleep is absolutely essential. Being a better leader is absolutely essential. But we just pick one small helpful habit. Let's say it's sleep. Once we've decided that we want to get better at sleep, we then might need to get some new knowledge and some new skills that make it easier for us to get better sleep. But that isn't enough. What we're then going to need to do is create a habit program using the best behavioural science that we can understand to make it as easy as possible for us to actually build that new habit and turn it into something that's automatic, that is a habit. And the second thing that we need to do to make this work is that we need to create transformational leaders. And you can think of transformational leaders as being a little bit like habit mechanics. They understand how to set up an environment and how to coach other people to build new helpful habits. So we train, we empower everyone to do personal change management, and then we create transformational leaders using our transformational leadership model. And the result of that is you get not only me power, but you also get team power. So helping everybody to build better habits and empowering them to do that is an absolute winner in the VUCA world if we want our people to be healthy, happy, and at their best. So I hope that makes sense. At this point, I'm going to take any questions that we have so far before I move on and talk more about how we actually build new habits. So Andrew, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yeah, we just have the one question at the moment, John, and just a reminder, everyone, that we will pause for some questions a bit later on, and the bulk of the questions will come at the end, so please do get your questions ready. But we do have one question from Toyosi. What does presenteeism mean? What does that mean, John?
It means that you're at work, but you're not really there. You're just being present, and you're just going through the motions. You're not really using the the cleverest part of your brain. That might be because you don't feel very well. It might be because you're disengaged with work. If we look at any organisation, this morning I was on a panel discussion in the City of London, and virtually, and the presenteeism there is seen is a big problem. It's seen as been a big problem when people are working from home. They're not getting out of bed necessarily, and they're just going through the motions. So that's what it means, just being present, really. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, John. That is the question, the only question we have so far, but please do use that Q&A function to keep them coming in.
Fantastic. So how do habits work? An increasing area that's written about. Often we see this 3-step habit loop. When we look at self-help books that are popular, that we can buy from Amazon or from Waterstones or anywhere else, they're often written by journalists who are really good at taking quite complex science and making it simple. And they often present this 3-step habit loop, but it's not sophisticated enough to actually help us to understand how to build new habits. So we've extended this, and we've created our own proprietary habit insight model called T.R.A.I.T habits. And I'm gonna explain what this means step by step. So T.R.A.I.T is an acronym. We imagine that we are fixed. We're not fixed. We can change. So it's kind of a double-edged acronym, as we like to use at Tougher Minds. So we're going to start with the A.I. The A.I stands for Ape Brain Incentive. So the ape brain is the most powerful part of our brain. If we're going to build new habits, we need to get it on board. So what kind of things can we do to help to manage the ape brain and compel it to help us to build new habits? Well, the first thing that we can do is we can help the ape brain. The ape brain is just interested in the next 10 minutes. But we can help the ape brain to understand, well, resisting this chocolate biscuit in the next 10 minutes is going to make it easier to achieve those goals at the end of the week and those goals in the distant future. Or breaking off from this webinar and just checking your phone or your emails, if you keep concentrating, it's going to make it easier to achieve your goals in the long-term future. So we have something called the FAM form that we help people to fire up their personal motivation. It's actually contained in our Willpower Wellbeing and Performance Planner. So we can activate personal motivation, and that's going to make it easier to get the ape on board. The second thing that we can do is we can activate what we call social influence. Remember, the P in the ape brain is about how we're perceived by other people. Social status is extremely important to us as human beings. The reason that we've been around for so long and thrived on planet Earth is because we're really good at operating intelligently in teams. That means that we need to be liked by other people. So we are influenced hugely by important people that we look up to. So if we want to build a new helpful habit, like getting to bed on time, we want to get the kids to get to bed on time, we need to model that behaviour of self. If I want my people to stop sending emails to each other, work-related emails after 6 p.m. at night, and me as a leader needs to model that behaviour as well. So that taps into the social influence piece. The final element that ape brain really understands is rewards and penalties. And this is where gamification comes in. We've created a whole model of rewards and penalties that has about 60 or 70 elements within it. But broadly, rewards and penalties can be social, intrinsic or extrinsic. And for any new habit that we want to build, we need to work out some rewards and penalties for either doing the kind of things that we need to do to build that habit, or we get penalized if we don't do those things. So there are 3 change factors that we understand from behavioural science are really powerful on getting the ape brain on board. And I'll show you how to activate those change factors later. They're part of a bigger set of change factors called the 9 action factors that we've created, but they're the ones that are really important for managing the ape brain. So that's the bottom of the habit loop. That really drives your habit. So we've got to be mindful of activating that. Let's go to the top of the loop and let's think about triggers. What's a trigger? Every habit starts with a reminder of what to do. This is an example. It could be a buzz in your pocket, and smartphones are probably the most powerful triggers we've ever invented as human beings. It's the most popular device on the planet. There are now more mobile phones on the planet than there are people, because they're really good at reminding you what to do. When you walk into a cafe, there are lots of triggers around. These are maybe some healthy triggers. These are maybe some less healthy triggers, or the high calorific food that gets put underneath your nose. Triggers aren't just external things, they can be emotions as well. So feeling hungry, feeling angry, that's a trigger. So let's couple a few triggers together. Let's imagine you feel hungry and you're in a place where you can access some high calorific food, some fatty, sugary food really quickly. That's a trigger. This brings us on to the routine. So this used to be my routine in those types of situations. I would then be thinking about, oh, the cake looks really tasty. And before I know it, I'd have a big cake in my mouth and I would be consuming maybe 600 calories of fat, sugar and salt within about 3 minutes, okay? That was my routine. The ape brain loved that, of course, because it got lots of energy into my body really quickly. And the final part of the loop is there's a training effect. So the more times I practiced doing that, the better I got at it, the more automatic I got at it, to the point where I didn't even recognize that I was doing it. I was just shoveling it into my mouth. So hopefully that makes sense. This is how the loops work. Let's take another example. Trigger, an email comes into your inbox and it's one of those kind of emails from that kind of person. Okay, that starts a routine. The routine might be a stress response. It's that person and there's a stress response going into my brain, the fight or flight response. Then I start to beat myself up and I'm telling myself I'm useless and I'll never be any good at this thing. This person is telling me that I'm not very good at. The ape brain likes that, kind of counterintuitively, because it's making you aware of a social status threat. So it likes that you're thinking about that. Yeah, there's a social status threat. Think about that again, that's good. That's going to keep us safe. And there's a training effect there. So the more you practice that stress response, the better you get at it. So this is how habits work. They're all the elements of the trait loop. So make sure that we're paying attention. To make sure that we're learning. Test question, see if you can write down the answer. What does TRAIT stand for? Okay, so just in case you didn't get it, here they are again. Trigger, routine, ape, incentive, and training. If you got it right, you get 10 points. Well done. At this point, I'm going to take, I think there's another question that's coming, so I'm happy to take that at this point.
Yes, that's right, John. Yeah, remember, we will take more questions at the end, folks, but the question we have right now is someone who missed the first one of the change factors, John.
So personal motivation. So it's compelling the ape brain to keep persisting by showing it, look, if we keep going here, that's going to help us to achieve our long-term goals and our medium-term goals and our goals for this month and our goals for this week and our goals for the end of today. So I was pointing out that one of the things that our Me Power Performance Planner does is allows you to create that future story by using what we call the FAM storm, the future, ambitious, meaningful story about yourself. So that was personal motivation.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, John, thank you for that. That was the only question at this stage. So yeah, thank you very much for now.
So if we're going to build new habits, excuse me, the first thing that we need to do is do what we call intelligent self-watching. To watch ourselves, to notice ourselves. And some of you might be familiar with the ape brain test. This is a free resource that we've got that is it's a self-watching tool. Allows you to analyze your habits in a fairly superficial, quick way. Allows you to quickly look at your helpful habits and your unhelpful habits. And you can access that on our website, any page on our Tougher Minds website. Just look at the top right-hand corner. On our Me Power Academy website for families in education is actually a child's version of that test. But, in reality, guys, that's a very superficial test. And if you want to take a deep dive into your habits, we've created some really specific self-watching tools within the planner. One is called the Ape Habits Reflection. It's a really powerful self-watching tool. And the other is called It Would Be Helpful If. So if you're really interested in analysing yourself in more detail, I suggest that you use those types of tools to take a deeper dive. They're very powerful. Once you've watched your habits, once you've analysed them, you're going to end up with what we call a Me Power wish list. All the small new helpful habits that you think would be helpful for you to build. Now, the challenge is that we can only build one small new helpful habit at a time, but it's good to have a list. The reason it's a wish list, you can't afford all the new habits now because we only have a limited amount of willpower each day. So what we need to do is look at the habits. You could grade them out of 10 maybe and prioritize the most important one. And for lots of people, that often comes back to one of these elements, and in particular, building better sleep, diet, or exercise, because that makes our brain work properly. And in the not too distant future, we're going to do an entire webinar about this. So you've got to identify the vital habits. And all you're doing is, remember, you're stepping back and you're looking at your habits and you're just targeting one. And this is what self-watching is about. So you're targeting, you're looking at your habits, you're targeting one. And by targeting one, you're creating what we call an aim. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to work on my sleep. But just knowing that you want to work on your sleep, having a goal to do that without a plan will just be a wish. So you need a plan. You need a plan to help you to actually build the new habit. And in combination, we call this the swap cycle. So we self-watch, we make an aim, and we make a plan. And that's going to make it easier for us to build the new habit. Self-watch, we make an aim, and we make a plan. So that's what we're doing. But knowing what we want to do is very different from doing it. We live in the knowledge economy now. You can Google anything and get new knowledge. New knowledge is kind of futile if you don't know how to change it into a habit. And often, our habit building process stops and starts with what we call verbal persuasion. So we tell, oh yeah, actually I do need to get more sleep. That would be really helpful. Or I compel someone else, hey, it'd be really helpful for you to build some better stress management habits. But verbal persuasion doesn't work in terms of building new habits. And just to show how difficult building new habits can be, I want to share a story from a very successful person, and the sort of person that we might imagine can change anything in their lives. But this insight shows us that it's not the case, that we're all human beings. And Andrew is going to give us more insight into Barack Obama's challenge with self-change. Over to you, Andrew. Andrew might be on mute there, which is why.
Yeah. So apologies for that. Just a slight depression of the keyboard by accident there, John. My apologies. But yeah, as you were saying, the challenging nature of changing habits and building a new helpful habit is emphasized by this story about former US President Barack Obama. There's some CBS News footage, and it shows Mr. Obama taking questions from the press shortly after he announced new laws to regulate the American tobacco industry. In the footage, a reporter asks him multiple questions about his own past smoking habits. He's asked how many cigarettes he currently smokes every day and if he smokes in the presence of others. Barack Obama, he's of course regarded by many as a consummate statesman and a highly capable leader and a powerful role model. He gave an answer that was very illuminating. He added that stopping smoking was a struggle. And he said, "Have I fallen off the wagon? Occasionally, yes." He continued to say that he said, "I would say I'm 95% cured, but there are times when I mess up. Like folks who go to Alcoholics Anonymous, smoking is something you continually struggle with."
So change is difficult. So remember that we have to have a process, and it starts with, first of all, watching ourselves, targeting the vital habit that we want to build. Then we're going to need to get some knowledge and skills about how to build that new habit. But then we've got to activate the change program around us. And to activate the change program, we need to use the best insights from behavioural science. And we've distilled behavioural science into 9 what we call action factors. We've got about 200 rules that we use to help the organisations that we work with and the people that we coach to build new habits. I'm not going to go into the detail of explicitly all these factors, but you'll recognise some of them from the 8 incentive management piece that I talked about. You can see the rewards and penalties there in the bottom right-hand corner. You can see the social influence there towards the right. You can see the personal motivation top right. So in order to help people activate these areas, within our performance planner, we've created some specific tools so that you don't have to be an expert in this area, kind of self-guide you. And our performance planner and these tools is what we call change aids. They allow you to go from the knowing to the doing to turning it into a habit. And one of those tools is called the habit building plan. And these questions will help you to activate those 9 action factors indirectly. So the first question on the habit building plan is describe the small, specific new habit that you want to build. So you might say, I want to get more sleep, but that's too vague to be helpful. We need to be really specific, small, specific new habit. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to get 10 more minutes sleep tonight than last night. So you've got to be that specific. You could start with 1 more minute sleep. It's about building things up over a period of time. So nail the thing that you want to do, write it down, make sure that you can quantify it. The second piece is describe what you currently do, your unhelpful habit, instead of the new helpful habit that you want to build. So I might say, well, I stay up late and I watch TV instead of going to bed earlier. So it's important to understand that. The next one is describe what reminds you, triggers your current unhelpful habit. So it might be, well, watching TV is entertaining, my brain likes it. It's more interesting most of the time than going to bed. On-demand TV now, it's addictive, my brain loves it. So we've got to understand what our new habit is competing against. The next one is describe how you will remind yourself to practice your new habit every single day. So, well, what I do is I use my Willpower planner, and also I use a tool called my Willpower weekly plan, and I stick that on the fridge. Literally, this is on my fridge. This is from yesterday. I did tick Wednesday yesterday because I hit all my targets and I did 8 miles of walking. That's on my fridge. It's a trigger, and I use my planner in combination with that. We practice what we preach here at Tougher Minds. Number 5 is, if it is helpful, describe the new knowledge and skills you will need to help you to secure the new habit. So not always for every habit will you need new knowledge and skills, but sometimes you will. So I said, well, I want to get a better understanding of the factors that impact my sleep quality and the skills that I can use to combat those factors. So in other words, do some personal research. There's all these top tips out there, but I've got to ultimately apply them to myself and work out what works best for me. Number 6 is, if it's helpful, describe how, where and how you'll acquire the new knowledge and skills. So I said, well, I'm going to watch the Tougher Minds How to Build Better Sleep Diet and Exercise Habits webinar, which is coming out soon. Number 7, describe in detail why you want to build this new habit. This connects to the personal motivation piece. So why do you want to build this new habit? So I said, well, it's going to save me time tomorrow. And ultimately, my big meaningful goal in my life is I want to help others to be at their best. That's why I do my job. And if I don't sleep very well, I won't be able to do that. Question number 8 connects to social influence. Who can you ask to help you to build a new habit? So because sleep is something that happens at home, I've said my family. So I can get everyone to buy into this. That's going to make it easier to do. 9 is what will be the reward for building the new habit? Rewards can be internal, external, social. I've got a mixture of those here. So if I build this new habit, I'll feel better every day. I'll waste less time. I'll spend more time doing clever work. I'll actually have less chance of getting a degenerative prefrontal cortex disease when I'm older, because we're seeing those links now between poor sleep patterns and poor brain health in the short term and the long term. And I'll get to spend more time, quality time, doing what I want. And then finally, what's the penalty if I don't do that? Well, it's the opposite of the above, ultimately. So that's how we activate behavioural science and the 9 action factors, by planning it out. That's something we've got in our Willpower planner. So if we want to build better habits, if we want to be our best in this very challenging world that we live in, we've got to adopt a purposeful development mindset and help our people in our families, in our teams, in our organisations to do that as well. That means we've got to educate people not only about how their brain works, but about how to build small, new, helpful habits. And to help people to do that, that's why we created the Willpower Planner, which we use on our leadership development programs, on our coaching programs, on our culture change programs. But it's also a resource that it's now digitally available, so anyone can use that. And because it's digital, you can use it month after month to keep building those new habits. These are the kind of habits that we help people to build. We help people to do Willpower first, and then we help them to be better transformational leaders and to build better teams. So if you're interested in these habits, this is the sort of stuff that we help people with. Do we have any more questions, Andrew?
No, John, that is it. No, so thank you very much indeed for your questions and your comments. So thank you, John. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so we're very active on LinkedIn, guys. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn or follow Tougher Minds, please do that. We're always passing out free things there. Thanks so much for your time, guys. Remember, it's about making tiny little changes, and having a process that is based on really good science is going to help you to build sustainable new habits. There's no right or wrong. It's about working out what works best for you. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, and I will see you soon.